Very good, very good. So just while I share on some forums, we're going to be going through your entire life story, or as much as we can in 2 hours. Can you just say a little bit about yourself to everybody?
Absolutely. I'm Lee Zimmerman. I started my career in Philadelphia before moving out to Los Angeles, following this little rock and roll marionette show that I came up with when I was in high school. Made this Jimi Hendrix puppet that kind of just dictated the entire direction of my entire life. And it was celebrity laden and filled with incredible friends all throughout the globe that you would only find in the busking industry. That's kind of my life.
So why did you go on? Were you from a performing or puppeteering family?
My dad was an actor. My sister's an opera singer. Actually, my sister was an opera singer in London for a while there before moving back to LA to Venice just to give me a place to live. No, everybody in my family does something in the way of performing arts, musicians and actors and
And so that
artists.
was
My
in
brothers
your
are really,
household.
yeah, yeah. And I knew the only way we were going to get noticed in my house was to come up with something creative. My dad didn't respect anything else. It was he didn't even notice that he had a second son until I got on television doing this rock and roll marionette thing. Yeah, I made this Hendrix puppet when I was in high school, and he just, yeah, whatever, man, you're wasting your time. As soon as I got in the newspaper, as soon as he saw me on television, now you're my son. So that, yeah, it follows like many things do.
And did you guys, would the family get together? Together? Would you perform as part of your socializing within the family?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, we would do that mostly just to show off for other people. When it was us, it was really more like a showdown of talent, just trying to command the attention of my dad. I mean, it's funny that you put it that way. I know exactly the kind of family you're talking about. No, ours was anybody has ever said to me, "Boy, you're really fast." I say because there were 7 people trying to make a joke. If you had a joke, you had to be writing it as you were talking it. You think of the ending somewhere in the middle while you're saying it. So I think
Which is a
that
great
had a lot
skill
to do with
for
it.
street work.
So I'm sorry.
So that's a great thing to have when you're doing street work, when some drunk guy is shouting at you and you can process and respond.
Absolutely. Yeah. Be mid sentence before you think of the joke. It's fine. You know you're going to find one. That's what your job is. Yeah. And that's funny too, because I didn't go off to become a performer. I went off to become an artist. And the only reason I fell into the street performing thing is because I literally had no money for art supplies. And I had this Jimi Hendrix puppet that I made when I was in high school. So I thought, I have this. I have this, the worst ghetto blaster I've ever seen in my entire life. I have this and I have that. I bet I could get just enough to buy Letraset, which is what I needed, was typeface that you scratch down. And that's exactly how it happened. Within a week, I got on the newspaper, and I swear, and I was like, "This is not what I wanted to do. I want to be an artist. I want to be an artist." And things
How
just kept
old are you?
coming together. 19 when I did my very first street show, and 2 weeks later, I was in the newspaper doing it. And some friend of mine, this is so, I will never forget this. Friend of mine comes back and he goes, "Hey, somebody saw that photo of you in the newspaper doing that Jimi Hendrix puppet." They were like, "He's found his calling." And I was so mad. I remember just losing it, melting down. Oh my God. You tell John Showers that I said I would never do this for a living. I'm not doing this. I hate doing this. This is just a goof. It was totally what I was meant to do. I was born to do it. And I was doing, and I found that out within like 5, 6 months. I just couldn't resist it. He was
So
right.
before you go on to what you were meant to do, why did you want to be an artist? And by that I think you were taught like a painterly artist, right?
Correct. Yeah, I drew on every flat surface as I can recall, and I had an etch a sketch, which is this whole other thing that I still do to this day. I loved to draw more than anything. I can't paint. I have no command of control. Yeah, the etch a sketch, the thing with the dial, that little magic screen. I'm sure I have one within reach anywhere. There's 1,000 of them in this house. Um, yeah, I set out to be a visual artist, and that's what I have. My degree is in visual communications, and ultimately that's what I do with the show that I do. It is visual communications. And the thing is, oh, this is so key. I hope I don't screw this up. I just want to make sure I get it right. My girlfriend now is a girl that I was madly in love with in journalism school, journalism class. We were on the school newspaper together. And what she wrote in my yearbook stands up to this day. She said, I believe you will find a way to combine your love of art and your love of music. And which was all I cared about, art and music. That's all I ever talked about. It's all I ever thought about. And the show that I came up with as a result of that is just that exactly. It's me loving music with art. That's the whole thing, making music visual.
And so you say you went and performed with a puppet as a goof just to make some money because you had no cash. How did the idea of performing how did this idea of performing with this puppet to earn cash come into your head? Like, why did you think of doing that?
Well, I'd only really ever made one thing that was complete. All those drawings that I described, all those flat surfaces that I drew on, and even the portfolio I used to get into my art school, I didn't think of any of them as a complete piece of artwork. And that Jimi Hendrix puppet that I made when I was 16, it was he was really, his music was so important to me. And again, everything that I see or experience, even music, it has to be visual. For me, it was just hanging over my desk, calling to me. And I did it for friends. They would come over, people would get high. I would sit there and I would just play away with my Jimi Hendrix puppet. And I realized people would watch this, and it just was a long shot. And when I say it was a goof, I mean, ultimately, I made the marionette as part of a goof, which is this. I wanted to be a musician too. I wanted to be an artist who could play the guitar, but I suck on guitar. I just have no digital dexterity for the guitar. I have a plateau I cannot cross over. I can play and play and play for as long as I can play, and I'll never be Jimi Hendrix. So that's really ultimately why I made the Jimi Hendrix puppet. Was I couldn't be Jimi Hendrix, and I didn't want to play like Jimi Hendrix. I wanted to be Jimi Hendrix and do the moves and do everything. So the puppet was an extension of that. It was me doing air guitar. Basically, my show is air guitar by proxy. I play Hendrix music. I have the Hendrix puppet acted out so that I don't have to stand there doing this and getting that look that people give me, like the one you're giving me right now when people do air guitar.
Hey, I'm entertained and engaged. The thing I'm thinking about when I'm listening to this case, so I can imagine you having friends over, and I can imagine you making this puppet and playing around with the puppet and entertaining people in your room and people enjoying it. But the step I'm struggling to find is, how did you think that you could make money on the street doing it? Where did that step come from? Did you see someone performing on the street? Did you?
Philadelphia had no street scene whatsoever. My brother probably came up with it. When we actually started, it wasn't in Philadelphia. The very first time we took a stab at it, we got away with 4 or 5 songs on the boardwalk in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, which is near like DC. And we go down there and we set up the worst possible. If you had said, set up in the place that the cops will get you out the quickest, that's where we set up, right there. We made just enough money to make, to play Joust. I remember that. We were so happy. We had like $7. We played Joust like 7 times, 4 times. And then I went back to art school the next week and I was like, I have nothing to lose. And the best thing of all, and this serves me my entire life. The first day I went out alone without my brother standing there to make me feel like I wasn't a complete, walking a tightrope, I was invisible. I found out I was invisible. My very first street show, I'm looking around. I would look up, I would glance up, I would be doing this Hendrix puppet, I would look around, and people would be whizzing past. And I realized, well, if I'm invisible, I could either be really embarrassed, and I could have stopped that day, and I'll never forget this. I should either quit right now or realize that I'm invisible. I could stand here all day and rehearse. It doesn't matter. I have nothing to be embarrassed about. They can't see me. Clearly, they are not seeing me. I'll just stand here and rehearse. And that's what I did for the first 3 years. All I did was just stare at that puppet. I didn't even talk. I had this Hendrix puppet. I looked down at it, and I just worked on his moves and got better and better at that. I just figured if they'll look, they'll look. And eventually, that's when it started to happen. It was so weird. It was very organic.
How often were you doing it? Was it once a week, once every month?
I got to tell you, it was just like a hook. I went out on a Thursday, I think it was. I was there. I went back to that same pitch and another one and another one. It was, the first one's free. It was like heroin. It was right away. It was a lot to do with the instant cash. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. Plus, I love doing it. I'd always loved doing it. I could listen to Hendrix music around the clock. To this day, I kind of do. So for me, it was literally all signs pointed to it. It was like I was a starship in a tractor beam. I swear it was exactly that. When I found myself doing it, it just felt so completely natural.
And you said over 3 years you got better using the puppets. So were you not? Because there's a thing with puppetry, right? With puppetry, there's a moment where the puppet becomes alive, right? And I stopped looking at a collection of cloth and hooks and ropes, and I start feeling something has life imbued in it. And
Right.
was that not? Were you not immediately moving the marionette strings and creating life?
For me, I was always seeing it as Jimi Hendrix. I was always looking down and seeing it. I wasn't a part of this equation at all. And I noticed that there was a switch. I remember when there was a switch, when people stopped seeing me and started seeing the puppet. You know, there's a very common thing among puppeteers, not common. It's the tradition to wear all black. I wasn't wearing all black, but I know I could be invisible. I had already proven that I could be invisible. And the better I got at the puppet, I could wear tie-dye shirts, which I did. And I'd still, I would be completely invisible from the top of his head. And I remember when that happened, when I got good enough that I now just disappeared in the background. That was kind of a neat feeling.
And was that within these 3 years?
Yeah. So those first 3 years, all I had was this Jimi Hendrix puppet. I did not talk, even though I'm, pretty talkative off stage. And I was always told, you're pretty funny. Why don't you talk in the show? Because I was terrified. And then one night I went out. My girlfriend at the time, art school girlfriend, Katie, got me hammered while I did my show. And then I just was able to talk. And Live Aid was happening that year. And I came up with this thing, Live Puppet Aid.
87?
Pardon me?
Is that 87? 85.
Yeah, 1986. That's exactly 1986. Right, the same year before Stop Making Sense. So what happened is those two things collided. Live Aid, I go to see Live Aid because it was in Philadelphia. I saw Tina Turner, and I was like 16 rows from the stage when Tina Turner took the stage with Mick Jagger. And I swear, I can only say it one way. She burned my eyebrows off. I mean, I could not get over the thing that I was looking at. I had heard her music. I just never listened to it before. I'd seen her perform. I just never seen it that close before. She was like electricity with feet. So I went and I had already started making an Elton John puppet because that was my obsession before Hendrix when I was a kid. That was what I was heavy into, drawing Elton John. Now it was Jimi Hendrix and Tina Turner. I had an Elton John puppet, and then I saw Stop Making Sense, and then it was a show, and then I was talking. By the time I saw Stop Making Sense, which to me was for years, it was my favorite film of all time. It is definitely my favorite concert film of all time, and definitely my favorite stage piece of all time. I could watch that. It's David Byrne in the big suit. I left that theater. I went out and I made a David Byrne in the big suit immediately. And now I had 5 counting this Frankensteinatra, because I loved Frank Sinatra. I made this Frankensteinatra, chairman of the morgue puppet. And it all just kind of came together within this last, like this one little summer, 2-month block from Live Aid to seeing Stop Making Sense, all these things in between. It just all became a show.
Where's this within the 3 years? Is this after the 3 years of you learning the kind of the mechanical skills a bit more of using Jimmy?
Exactly that. It was all within that same time. And I remember too, like just being so clueless. Just being so clueless. And to this day, never respected money. I was always too obsessed with doing a good job, never respected cash. Always just so obsessed with doing the look of the puppet, never giving a thought to wearing, like, I'm wearing a gray sweater. I was just clueless. I was not dressing stage. I wasn't thinking stage. I was thinking, how does that puppet, what can I do to make it look better? I could remake that Stratocaster. That would be better. Because the things
And
that
so
I was obsessed with.
You were a tinkerer, play around with the props all the time and change them. And maybe if I put the tape on here and I repaint this here.
Very much so, very much so. And I also came to believe, no, I'm not ashamed of it, that they most certainly had a spirit in them because I put it there. So I followed them around a lot. A lot of times, I swear to you, it was exactly these words. I would think this. The controls felt like a leash, like I was holding the puppet back. And all I really had to do was let the puppets go and follow and just remember the cool moves. They came up with their own moves. I would be doing something and it would go and make a move. And I go, hey, that's pretty cool. And if I could remember it, I would do it again. But for the most part, I don't even like to think of them as controls. I like to think that it's that I'm influencing, I'm persuading the puppets to do what I'm asking them to do.
But what I find quite interesting You find this people, I think, that perform street a lot when they're beginning their career or when they're learning their craft. You have so much time when you're beginning to play on the street that people tend to not have set forms for things. They tend to intuit their movements and how they perform. And it sounds like you did the same thing with these puppets. You developed this intuitive sense of movement, and then there's perhaps something in the back of your brain, or there's some part of your mind which you're not necessarily cognitively using, that then allows you to intuit the movements and to as you say, channel them into these puppets.
Boy, I wish you were on this half of the interview. That was so beautifully put. I really appreciate you putting that to words. I got to remember that. Yeah, you know
Well,
what?
luckily we're recording this.
Your heart always knows better. Your eyes always know better. The other thing, I never use my hands when I do this show. I intuitively, the perfect word, I always trust my fingers to know what they're doing. I do it with my eyes. I see what I want to do. And because also, I learned out of a book. My brother and I got a book out of the library. We didn't know any puppeteers. I was only into the Muppet Show in a big way, which is hand puppets. I didn't know any marionette people. The only marionettes I had ever seen were in Godfather Part 2. And they weren't great. I didn't care for those marionettes. They were violent. That was the other thing. I hate violence. I can't stand it. Punch and Judy shows. I respect them. I get it. I understand the tradition of them, but I don't get it. I don't like violence. And the way that it all came together was I would follow along with my eyes. I would just want to see the puppet do something, and not knowing what puppets couldn't do was a huge gift from the universe. I didn't know the puppets couldn't do splits. I didn't know the puppets couldn't slide on their backs or crawl on their bellies. But when I showed other puppeteers that years later, like Philip Huber, one of the world-class puppeteers of all time, he said, I've never seen anybody do what you just did with that marionette, because I didn't know you couldn't. Is a great way to start any venture. I didn't know you couldn't.
You had the gift of learning in a vacuum.
Pardon me?
You had a gift of learning in a vacuum.
That's such a great way to put it too. Yeah, it is a grand gesture from the universe to say, we trust you enough to do this on your own. Yeah, you don't need a teacher, dude. You're going to go so much farther, because if you learn out of a book, as Eddie Van Halen said it, if you learn out of a book, then you learn out of a book. There's nobody going to take a new chapter. Nobody's going to write a new chapter if you keep handing over the same book over and over again. So he taught himself. I think there's so much to be said for that self-taught thing.
And so are you working this same pitch then? So was it a pitch in, my memory's awful, so forgive me if I get it wrong. Was it a pitch in Baltimore?
There was a pitch in Baltimore that I did a couple of times. Pier 39. I'm sorry, the Baltimore's Inner Harbor.
So were you moving around at the beginning, or were you working one pitch at the beginning, these first 3 years?
I stayed those 3 years. I was in Baltimore on occasion, but for the most part, you could have found me in one of 3 addresses in Center City, Philadelphia, Old City, Philadelphia, South Street, which is the it's the Hollywood Boulevard rock and roller kind of conclave. You know, it's where the art house theaters and stuff are. It was somewhat gentrified at the time, but it was pretty seedy too. It was everything. It was everything it was. It was a great place to do, but it was all basically in Philadelphia. And I don't know if you know this, Philadelphian spectators are famous for several things. One of them is not taking any crap. Philadelphian spectators threw snowballs at Santa Claus. Okay, they booed Santa Claus. They threw snowballs at Santa Claus and got a reputation for it. That's a good way to train. If you're going to get good at something, do it in front of a Philadelphian audience. They'll let you know whether or not you suck. That was a huge boon, and that's not even a joke. That's a truth. So by the time that you go indoors with all that street training, that's the thing about street performance. When you do make your way to this nightclub, that comes way later for me. You got all these chops because you've got to make something happen every 5 seconds, every 7 seconds. Something visual has to be happening at all times. But you've got to have at least a punchline, every 8 to 10 or 11 or 12, whatever your personal little bent is. Certainly there are other entertainers that are much, much better and can do the longest, broadest strokes. I can't do that. But by
there's also performers which create, contract shows where they'll go, I will do this, and hold you for as long as possible and do nothing and just try to sell this one thing. When you were saying that, I thought one of the joys is because you're doing a piece of puppetry, you're doing a piece of actual theatre on the street, as opposed to what a lot of mine, your fraternity do, which is kind of contract performance, stay, watch, I'll do this. Whereas you're creating a piece of theatre with these puppets. Just to
I'll tell you
focus a
what.
bit on the street beginnings. When you're setting up originally, are you just doing puppets on the pavement? Are you like how do you house
Yes.
your puppets?
So funny too, man. God, you're really good at this. I had a towel and I would just lay this towel out. And the other thing is, when other puppeteers see how I wrap up my puppets, they all steal it. They love this way that I keep my marionettes from being untangled. You want to keep the controls as far away from the puppets as possible. So I would lay out a towel and roll the puppets up in the towel like a joint, right? And then when I would want to do the stage, I would just unroll the towel, lay it out flat, a great big rectangle, and put a speaker on either side. And that's what Jimmy would hump and beat up and knock over because he's Jimi Hendrix. That was like not a stage. It was an anti-stage. And then as time goes on, you realize, oh, if I'm higher up, more people can see me. As time goes on, you realize, you know what? There's a reason why they gave me all those foam core when I was in art school. Now I'll just have the crappiest looking foam core stages for the rest of my life and that is another thing. Once you've learned on something wrong, you're kind of stuck with it for the rest of your life. Well, all my puppets, I like to perform on foam board or foam core because it bounces back. And when Jimmy would jump, like it bounced back and it was alive. And other puppeteers, they use wood. And when I perform on wood, it just feels dead. Like the feet land. But when I'm on, foam core, it bounces around. And other puppeteers, they look at this and they laugh and they go, what are you doing? What are you thinking? I say, I don't know. I wasn't thinking, I was following.
But does it give you a sense of weight by having this weightless object performing on a weightless floor?
Yeah, I guess it does. Sometime down the road, when I was in a position to hire other puppeteers to use my puppets, they couldn't stand how light they were. They put lead weights in the feet of my puppets. They said, do you mind if we gouge out the bottoms? Just so we have some kind of weight to this thing. My puppets are a lot smaller than a lot of marionettes. A lot of marionette people don't use 18-inch tall puppets. They go 24, 28, and 30. And that was another thing when by the time I got into nightclubs was hearing all the time, can't you make them bigger? Can't you make them bigger? Well, the center of gravity on my marionettes is very essential to their movements. They move like little Maseratis. I have larger puppets. I have a great big Elvis Presley puppet. It's like 25 inches, 28 inches tall. And he moves like a Cadillac, like he should, like a Cadillac. But I have my Jimi Hendrix puppet. That moves like a Maserati, man. Actually like a Spitfire, just like that. And I love that. I love that. So for me, keeping it small, again, that wasn't necessarily very considerate of the scope of the biggest audience I could get, but it was definitely for me. I want the puppet to move the best that it possibly can. I don't care about the size of the audience. I always, again, fail to respect money.
Well, you started in a vacuum, so you didn't have the help or the hindrance of the industry standards.
True
But that
enough.
forces you to work in a different way. And you, by accounts you've given so far, develop work which is different from a lot of other puppeteers.
I have to agree on that one. See, the other thing about the address that I had in Philadelphia, the only other street performers that really ever came out of there were Penn and Teller. They were right there, Head House Square. That's where they got their first shows, were in Head
Wow.
House Square, Philadelphia. And so I did have, I had that sense of magic. I knew that magic could happen there. And I did realize that street performance, I knew about Cirque du Soleil. I knew that there was something to be said for it. I knew that it was, there were no other street performers in Philadelphia except for like a saxophone player or a guitar player, but no scene, no shows, no jugglers, none of that. And I feel like we're jumping way ahead,
And
but I will say this, just as a preface, I'll hold you hostage. It's a contract show. No, but when I finally meet like Brits, when I met the real deal buskers from around the world at the Edmonton International Street Performers Festival, it was like learning a language I already knew. I had no idea that this thing was so even possible, that there were buskers around the world, people so unique, so brilliant, so fascinating. They had to invent a job to make it in the universe. No other thing would do for them. They had to make up a job. And that's what I found out when I got to Edmonton Street Performer Dick Finkel Festival and met Pee-wee and Emma, Stickerback Plasticus, Hoople, and all my best friends that are all to this day Canadians. I had never met real street performers before, and I had no understanding of the word theater. None. Zero. Theater as it applies to street performance. I didn't know that the two things could walk hand in hand, and not only could they have to. I didn't know that either.
And you didn't. So you didn't see what you were doing as a theatrical act before.
They did. People brought me around to see my show. I didn't actually know what I had until I actually hung around with people like, most specifically, Pee Wee and Emma. Emma was the one who said, no, this is what you're doing correctly. This is what you're doing correctly. This is what you don't even know that you're doing. And this is why we love you, because you don't know any of these things. You're just doing them. And that was, I cannot overstate what that did to my heart and my instincts, and just kicked me into a triple hyper overdrive to find out that I was at least onto some of it instinctually.
Well, let's drag you back a little bit then.
Please.
So we get to the end of the 3 years and you become incompetent. You've got now a selection of puppets. It's not just Jimmy. He's got a whole family of, tiny 16 celebrities traveling around with him. What happens for you after these 3 years?
Continue to stay in Philadelphia for another 4, and pretty much came up. I'd done there wasn't one television show that was produced locally that I wasn't a part of. There wasn't one. Every newspaper had found out about the puppet guy, and I had a name. I was the paper machine. But after a while, you just give in. I'm the puppet guy because that's what everybody called me. You've seen him.
So you were like a local celebrity.
Totally. And but I knew that Philadelphia, I was done. I was like, they would, on the local radio stations. Can
I hear a bit of your life as being the puppet? Did you go to bars and people would go, hey, puppet guy? Did people buy you beers for it? Was there a sense of your face being red?
I couldn't buy pizza at this one place anymore. I was always afraid, like, they must think I'm just coming in here because I'm getting free pizza. No, I loved their pizza. And after a while I stopped going. No, it was exactly that. And like the radio stations would play Hendrix songs and they would go, hey, this is going out to the Puppet Man and stuff like that. And I would hear this. I was a local legend for that decade between 83 and 89. Everybody knew my show. Everybody knew it. It was a really wonderful thing for Philadelphia, but I knew that I had much bigger aspirations. I just knew there was no way I was getting out of Philadelphia. I didn't have any resources. I never made enough money. Did your show
still work after that? Like, if everyone's seen your show and everyone knows who you are, does the show do people still watch the show? I mean, I suppose it's different.
Everybody loved that I was always adding new stuff. I had my staple show, and that's what they would bring their friends back. Are you going to do the Hendrix? Are you going to do the Hendrix? Are you going to do the David Byrne? But every week you'd come back and I'd have something new. I'd have an Elvis Costello puppet. I mean, the ones that I listed, those 5 things that I listed, that doesn't tell you about the transformation puppet that I had that wears a skirt that flips over and becomes something else. Like
like a quick change.
Yeah. And so I would have so there would be the 5 pillars of the show and then all these other things, connective tissue. And once I started talking, the show became basically an excuse for me to be funny. More than anything else, it was just another format for me to talk over. Once I started talking, and it just all held it together. The puppets just were like the pillars, the poles in the circus tent. You know what I mean? And then people would come back to see the show. I know exactly what you're talking about. I was always amazed by that too. How many times can you watch this? I would say that to people. How many times can you see this? I've seen you here a million times. Nope, you keep coming up with new stuff. That was always.
And how are you living in Philadelphia? Are you paying for a flat? Are you living in a vehicle? Are you camping in a tent by a river?
I was managing to pay for an existence this way. I also had a couple of side gigs. I was a movie usher, and I worked as a manager of an art supply store when I met this amazing woman. And this is where it all changes. One day I'm doing a show. It sucks. I'm packing up. I'm getting ready to leave. I'm going to go home because I can't get anything going. It's a Sunday. I never work Sundays, and this is why I never work Sundays. Why did I try this time? So I've got my back to the audience, and I hear somebody say, well, entertain me. And I turned around, and it was literally, my heart skipped a beat. She was just so stunning, this woman, Lisa. And it was love at first sight, absolute kismet. We were together for the next 2 years in Philadelphia, but she made it very clear, if we were going to stay together, I'd have to raise enough money to go to California with her. And this is where everything changes for me. I would have followed this woman anywhere. And I knew I had something really good. I wrote I write a lot about what I've done, and one of the things I said is I knew I had something worth something, but I knew there wasn't anything I could do about it. Well, this changed everything because I was following this woman wherever she went, and that meant getting the money together. If it meant staying on that street corner until I had whatever it was, $2,500 to pay half of a truck to get to California to stay with her, then that's what I was going to do, and that's what we did in the October 1990. Which was 1 year exactly after the Loma Prieta quake in San Francisco. We landed in San Francisco 1 year and 1 day later. And within 3 weeks, I was working at Pier 39. This is where it all changed around, man. It was this one girl, Lisa Fitting. If it wasn't for her, I would have just petered away in Philadelphia and probably stayed in art supply sales. It would have sucked.
So you needed kind of just the impetus, the catalyst to drive you out of what sounds like a comfortable life. You know, everyone knew you, everyone was nice to you, you had a sense of place.
Totally. But again, yeah, there would have been a shelf life for how many times eventually I would have hit the wall and how many times anybody could see it. But more than that, I knew that I had something really good and I wanted to be in a music video. That's what I thought that this was designed to do. And I was pretty sure I could get that if I was in the right city. I was just in the right place. Someone would see it and then it would all come together. And I just had this inkling going all the way back to my childhood of a certain kind of a lifestyle that I was going to lead. I swear to you, for some reason, I did have depressions, even at the age of like 8 and 10 and 11, that I would be leading a life of Playboy magazine, Playboy Mansion stuff, which is what ultimately came to happen. And I swear to you, that was in my head and heart the whole time I was working in Philadelphia. Somehow I know this somehow gets me to where I wanted to go in my earliest fantasies. I just know it does. I just know it does. I don't know how I know it does, but I know what it does. So if I may complete that story, it's just that when we got to San Francisco, we were there for 4 months. I'd gone to all this trouble to stay with her. 4 months into being there, she pulls the plug on the relationship and says, I'm not happy. I want you to move out. And I think a lot of it had to do with she didn't really like the fact that I was shining like crazy in Pier 39. And I got a job at a special effects house. So in addition to working at Pier 39, I was making miniatures at this place called Midland Special Effects. And my life was already millions of times better. And she didn't care for that because her life wasn't getting any better, any faster. I loved this woman. I cherished this woman. And one day I woke up and just sobbing, ripped my heart out. Said, I've just had the worst nightmare of my entire life. Nobody loves me, not even my own family. And I'm about to be homeless. And she goes, well, I want you to move out. I don't like, I'm not happy and you have to go. And that's when I found myself in the only place I had to go, California's Venice Beach. That's where my sister, who'd lived in England as an opera singer, had moved to Venice. She could have been anywhere. But in March of 1991, she was in Venice Beach, California. And again, now I really am having to believe in Shakti Gawain creative visualization. This book that I'd read in art school, all these things that I'd started to visualize just started to happen. I could not understand it, so I stopped trying to understand it and just followed. And I found myself in Venice Beach, and within 6 weeks, I was doing nightclubs that I'd only dreamed about doing. After decades, I will eventually one day work so hard that I can work at the Improv in Los Angeles. That's all I want to do. Just if I could do one show at the Improv in Los Angeles, and I'm sure I could do that if I work all these other millions and millions and millions of other clubs, I will get there. But that's not what happened at all. I landed in Venice Beach. Within 6 weeks, a guy goes, I can get you at the Improv and get you a 6-minute showcase. I said, you kidding, right? He goes, no, we'll get you at the Improv on Melrose, because there was two. There was one in Santa Monica and one on Melrose. That's the one I dreamed about since I was a little kid. Richard Pryor, live at the Improv. Robin Williams, live at the Improv. All these people that I dreamed of meeting and one day performing like, and it all came to happen, man. I worked with Robin Williams. I worked with Jerry Seinfeld at the Improv.
Wow.
In Los Angeles. All as a result of following this one perfect ass across the country, having her dump me, and having only one place to go. The place that I've been dreaming of going since I was 4.
So let's say this, when you first go and work Venice Beach, right? What was it like for you? How different was it from everywhere else?
Terrifying. I guess It would be difficult to discern whether or not it was what I was told how afraid I should be because I'm puppets and walking into Venice Beach. Are you sure you want to do that? Some guy gave me a pair of brass balls. Guy from San Francisco named Barry Gould said, "Here's a pair of brass balls. You're going to need these if you're going to take puppets to work on Venice Beach, you idiot." So I took them, and it just worked out. Thank God it was a rock and roll show, or I'd have been eaten alive. But it was a rock and roll show. So
why did they say that? Is Venice Beach a big crazy place? Like, treat me like I'm an idiot. I have no idea.
Oh well, Venice Beach is definitely Los Angeles to the laser point, which means we don't take any crap. It's got to be really, really good, and it's also Los Angeles, so there's gangs around, and it's violent, and you could say the wrong thing or wear the wrong thing and get killed. You could accidentally make a joke, or like I did, you could have black marionettes and be a white guy and get notes in your hat that say things like, "This show insults black people. Please cease to do it." That's Venice. That you would only see in Venice. That never happened to me anywhere else except by the Malcolm X guys. They used to come by and drop notes in my hat that said, "This, your show," which suggests that the greatest guy who ever lived is Jimi Hendrix, and that his music is the best music ever that we should all still be listening to 54 years later. Yeah, I don't know how they got the impression that I was trying to make fun of black people.
There's a level of respect to go and drop a note in your hat. It's like they didn't go and fuck up your show. They didn't go and destroy what was going on. They
That's
obviously,
an excellent point.
Yeah, they obviously had some kind of, reverence for you to quietly say these things.
Such an excellent point. You do make such an excellent point with that, because I did have opportunity to speak with them once I saw them walking past again. And you're absolutely right. You know what? They were respectful towards me, and I explained my heart to them, which was, "You don't understand. My heart is wrapped around this guy's music. That's all I'm trying to say." And I think they actually came to understand that. But I had never had that before. I had never had an anonymous note suggest that what I was doing was in any way disparaging of race. It just hadn't occurred to me. I guess. Philadelphia is different.
It's how people interpret things, and it's what the context is in people's minds when they.
You are so kind to have done that for me, because I'd completely lost that point. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that is an excellent point. They were very respectful of me and my audience to not do that to my show. That's really nice of them.
And so it seems like Venice Beach is quite a happening place, right?
In particular, in 1991. Now, its heyday would have had to have been the late 80s, like Pier 39. If for Euro people, it's where you are. For the US, Pier 39 in San Francisco, that's the pinnacle. Venice Beach, that's like right the second step down from Pier 39. Yeah. And if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, as the old adage goes. And the things you see there, my next door neighbor was a chainsaw juggler. I'm there, I'm trying to do nuances with Jimi Hendrix puppets, like the littlest tiny movement is what's going to get this laugh. It's not that he plays the notes up and down that really amaze you. It's when he stops and bends it ever so slightly. That's when I get my biggest response. But I'm being challenged by a chainsaw juggler right over there, 30 yards in that direction. So there's that. And again, does that make you stronger? Does that make you ready for the improv? You damn right it does, because that's what I remember more than anything else.
How is a puppeteer? We'll get to the improv in a second. No, believe me, I want to get to that. I think it's some really interesting stuff to be mined from those stories and experiences. But I'm quite interested in how a puppeteer grows stronger from having someone next to them with a chainsaw, which is a loud, aggressive, dangerous-looking prop. How do you up your game?
You reinvest with your own attention span, man. You gotta feel it. I can only tell you that everything in those days just tested my resolve. Everything in those days just grounded me deeper. And one of the things that you can do with a marionette is just don't take your own eyes off it. If you close out the rest of the world, people will get lost in it. And I hear that more than anything else. I completely forgot you were standing there. I completely forgot you were standing there. It's about the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me. And that's how you do it. When there's a chainsaw guy over here, and then Michael Collier, this really filthy comedian. By the way, the chainsaw guy, loveliest guy, Chad Taylor. I love Mad Chad Taylor.
Mad Chad, yeah.
He's a beautiful guy, and he didn't want to screw me up. And so there was this thing. He had to make his living. I understood that. and he was very kind to put his chainsaw in a way. He knew my show, and he was willing to work with me, because that, to answer your question on where I should have started anyway, other performers generally, for the most part, are really kind to other performers. Even guys with chainsaws can be really lovely in heart and say, I don't want to hurt you. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to make my living. And I know when you're getting ready to do Hendrix, it's when you break from Hendrix, then I'm going to start on my chainsaw and grab a crowd. And we worked it out. So that's a huge part of it. That was a huge part of it, that he was allowing me that space.
It really is amazing, isn't it? How performers in the street who have no authority, no gun to the head to tell them, share and figure out a way to work together. Particularly like with Chad, with that big chainsaw, he could have potentially, when he wanted to, rev the chainsaw and kind of been a very oppressive force to your work.
To be perfectly honest, before we became friends, he would do that. And then after a couple of weeks, he saw that I wasn't going anywhere, and he knew that we knew common friends. And I mean, he tested me a little bit. That's fine. And you are absolutely right. He could have, and he did at first, but then within minutes, you have to work the room you have to share the space. And street performers are amazing with that. They do, for the most part, find that little common place. It is a very big earth. There should be enough room for 2 shows. We got to figure this out. That is amazing that you pointed out. Boy, you have a really, you look at things from such a beautiful vector, I must say.
Thank you, much appreciated. So, you get to go to the improv. What are your first footsteps walking into the improv? What's it like?
Oh my God!
I dreamt about this.
I had dreamt about it, and the other thing is that I did not feel at all ready for it. I knew that I really wanted to do it. I knew that it had been something that I'd always wanted to do. But then, when the reality of it was, I show up and I go in and I meet the guys who own the place. I'm terrified, and they can see it. The guy's being really nice. His name's Bud Friedman. Bud Friedman said, you look a little nervous. I said, I just want to do a good job, which is my code for I'm terrified. Please don't let me screw up. He goes, you have time to take a walk. Go take a walk. You can go around the block. You got time 3 times around the block. And what I did was, I was out before he finished that sentence. This is key. This is the key moment to everything. I took a right on Melrose Boulevard and I started walking, and I'm going, he can see it. He can see the pre-Hindenburg in me. He knows I'm going to fail. He knows I'm going to fail. He knows I'm going to blow this 6-minute showcase. He knows that other people have said nice things, but oh my God, he can tell that oh my God. And then I looked up, and you know the golden hour, right? You know, when they shoot movies, the golden hour, there's nothing like it. Well, on a movie set, the last 75 minutes or so of light are no lighting designer could ever produce this kind of light. The way that it was lit up on the hills that day, it looked like Full Metal Jacket, which was shot 75% of Full Metal Jacket. If you look at it, is shot in the golden hour, which could not be produced by any other light than the sun. And I looked up.
It's dawn and dusk, right?
Exactly. I'm walking, and I'm saying, I can't do this. I'm going to fail. Oh my God, this is terrible. This is terrible. And I look up. There's the Hollywood sign for the very first time, and it's lit up it's bathed in the golden hour. And I thought to myself, I haven't seen this. I've been here for 6 weeks, 7 at this point. I've been in LA for 7 weeks, but I got everywhere in cabs. I had not seen the Hollywood sign, and I was just gazing at it, thinking, wait a minute. That's right. That is how people get this. They work really hard. They work in the cold. They expand their craft. They go, they study. Holy crap. I am entitled to do this. At the very least, I've earned this opportunity. All I have to do is pull off a decent show. If I just do a decent show, then everybody, including my ex-girlfriend, who had just told me, whatever you think is going to happen with your show isn't going to happen. That was the last thing she said to me as I walked out of the door. And I could hear that echoing in my head, but I could also hear my brother making fun of me. I could hear other people making fun of me. And I could think to myself, if I do 6 good minutes, just 6 tolerable minutes on a world-class stage, I can forever tell the rest of the humanity I had a world-class show. All I know is I had a world-class show. All I have to do is 6 minutes, and the mayor of show business will come up, pinch my bum, and say, welcome. And that's all I wanted, was to just get through that 6 minutes. Well, it was evident within a couple of seconds that it was killing. And I just could not believe that I was killing at the Improv. And I'm looking down, and in my head, I hear these words: street performers, we have to get a laugh every 8 seconds. Stand-ups. And I'm looking around the room. They're all laughing. And I'm going, Stand-ups can get a laugh every 15 seconds. I have to get a laugh every. I mean, this is incredible. They're freaking out over my puppets right now. This is incredible. I can't stop smiling, and I'm having this out-of-body experience. I swear to you. Everybody wanted me to do well. I've told this story a lot. I've written about this story, and all I can tell you is this. Every person there felt my nerves. Every person there was on my side. Every person there was, it was pouring over me. I could feel it in my chest. Wave after wave of positive energy. You will do well. You will do well. You will do well. And I get emotional when I tell it. I get emotional when I write it. And I get emotional when I say it to this day. And that is 30 some years ago. It washed over me. And when I finally hit the last note of my Hendrix puppet, I go like this. And I blam, knock over all the amps and I drop the puppet. And they just stood up. Wow. Huge, loud standing ovation. It just took my breath away. And I had to duck behind my stage, kind of wipe away the tears, and grab my David Byrne puppet to come up. And I'd never worked with a mic. That's the other thing. I'd never worked with a mic before in my entire life. I'd never worked with a mic. I'm at the Improv, leaning into a mic from over here, yelling into a mic that's way over there, trying to do this thing, and the audience didn't care. They were just so there. Dude, you will do fine. You are fine. You are fine. We love you. We love you. You will be fine. It was exhilaration on a whole other level. I had never felt anything like that. If I go to my grave and anyone ever says, Lee, what's the greatest moment of your entire life? It will be the split second that follows Jimi Hendrix knocking over his amplifier at the Improv on June, whatever it was.
And do you think part of it was the fact that you were vulnerable when you first went up there? You were nervous, and maybe the joy of being a puppeteer as well, as you can go up there being fragile, and then the puppets come to life, and then suddenly people have this affirmation of this nervous person and this huge character erupting out of these puppets.
All I can say is, yeah, every word you just said, that was it exactly. They knew. They could see it in my face. They could tell from my demeanor. They could tell by the way that I didn't know how to use a microphone. They could tell a lot of stuff. And I just... I know that I projected one thing, and that was I was aware that I was vulnerable. I wasn't trying to hide it. I wasn't trying to hang a bell on it either. But I muttered something into the mic. I can't remember exactly what, but something about, I can't believe they're letting a puppet show go at the Improv. They never did that. They didn't let ventriloquists. They didn't let magicians. I had no idea why they were letting me have this grand pass. Well, I just couldn't fathom it. But at this point in my life, and from that night forward, everything I ever wanted just kind of happened for like the next 15 years. Anything I ever visualized.
So let's keep it very telescoped just for now. So you walk off, you've got this huge standing ovation. What happens that night? Are you meeting lots of people? Are they giving you accolades?
Jerry Seinfeld, who was my favorite stand-up. Well, Sam Kinison was my favorite stand-up. Then this other guy, Jerry Seinfeld, that had just come out with this new TV show that I loved. I was recording every episode. I got to perform at the Seinfeld Final Rap Party years later. Yeah, I met him. I met a guy that I can't stand to this day that a lot of people know, Bill Maher. He was a total tool to me that night. He was a total tool to me at the Christmas party. He's a total tool for life. I love telling people what a total tool Bill Maher is. Yeah, I met everybody. Roseanne Barr was the MC that night. Roseanne Barr. Tom Arnold.
And that's Roseanne as in Roseanne.
Yeah, but at the time, she was Roseanne Arnold. She was, as I recall now, no, Tom and Roseanne were the MCs, but it was her slot. So Tom followed her up on stage. It was pretty funny. She didn't introduce me though. Bud did. Bud Friedman did.
And so really when you go out of this gig, you said it set you up. So what happened after that? How did that change your life directly after this gig?
I remember that he used LA lingo. So I get this reaction, right? And now I'm a completely other guy. I mean, I'm just this other guy. It's like the weight of it. Now I'm getting ready to talk to Bud Friedman. I put my show over in the corner of the room and he sits me down and he says, so we want to be in business with you, which I didn't know was LA lingo for what it sounds like. We want to be in business with you. But what he really meant was, and what he was trying to do was set me up with a photographer, an agent, a manager, a really put together team. And he asked me how many minutes of this I had. And at the time I only had 18. He said, well, it's not enough to headline, but let's send you to Vegas. So you can do the middle slots in Vegas. And
what's in it for him? Why did he want to do that?
I was really, really killing. I think he saw potential. I think he saw that there was somebody that was
Is it
so
altruistic?
wide-eyed. Bud Friedman is, yeah, he very much loves the art of comedy. He and his partner Mark Lano, they're the real deal. They only started it because they loved it. Sort of like Atlantic Records with Ahmed Erdogan and his partner, Jerry Wexler. They loved the music. That's why they did it. They wanted to make a buck. They wanted to make $1.01, but they did it because they loved Aretha Franklin and Led Zeppelin and Cream. They wanted those things because they believed in it. And that's the way it was for Mark Lano and Bud Friedman for Andy Kaufman. I mean, they developed these people. They saw them on stage. They saw that they loved doing it. That's the other thing. Is there anything more? Well, now there is, but is there anything more contagious than enthusiasm? Carlos Santana said that, and I love the way that he said that, because when people see it and when they see that, what are they really applauding? They're applauding how many hours you've obviously put into your craft. They're also applauding. I do have a great ringtone, I gotta say. Eruption by Van Halen. I don't miss any phone calls. uh, you can tell when somebody believes what they're doing. You can tell when somebody loves what they're doing, and that is most of the show, isn't it? For me, I could watch somebody be enthusiastic about what they do for hours. Doesn't even matter what they're doing.
It's positive empathy, right? You look
That's a great way to put
at
it.
the person into what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so,
way to put it.
So did you go to Vegas?
Yeah, I went to Vegas within 4 weeks of that very first night. And I opened for another guy that I really admired in those days, Max Alexander. He'd been in a film called Roxanne that I loved. It's a film by Steve Martin. So my whole the whole other half of my head is devoted to watching films and hearing production stories. I just wanted to hear production stories out the wazoo about Roxanne, which is shot in Nelson, British Columbia, and I knew British Columbia, and it was incredible. It was an incredible feeling to meet all these people and get to be with them, and then to shine on that stage, because this is my favorite part about the improv. Are you a Sopranos fan by any chance? Were you a fan of
I
the
watched a few
Sopranos?
episodes of The Sopranos.
Well,
I've definitely watched a few.
I was never a huge fan of The Sopranos, but the guy that ran the club was on the show, and this is before The Sopranos existed. But he looked like he should be on a show called The Sopranos that should exist already, because he was such a mobster-looking guy, and he's lovely, beautiful guy, but scary as hell, just gigantic, lantern jaw, huge, and definitely connected. He could have been wearing Jimmy Hoffa's wristwatch. He loved me because I kept getting standing ovations in his show. He took me to see Sinatra. When he found out that a guy with Led Zeppelin, because now I have this huge rock and roll Bon Jovi hair, but I'm a Led Zeppelin, hardcore loving Led Zeppelin guy who loves Frank Sinatra. Sinatra was performing at the Riviera Hotel that exact same week on the opposite side of the hotel. So in a scene straight out of Goodfellas, Steve takes me off stage one night. I finish my show, do a really good job. He sits me down. He goes, "Come on, finish that up. We're going to go this way." And he walks me through the hotel. We're going this way, that way, this way. Express elevator, backstairs. We find ourselves behind Frank Sinatra, watching Frank Sinatra perform, looking at Frank Sinatra's teleprompter, reading every single lyric and every single bit of stage patter on Frank Sinatra's teleprompter. Excuse me, Mr. Sinatra. I'm sorry, Steve. Steve would always correct me. It's Mr. Sinatra. Sorry, Steve. Mr. Sinatra. That was what it was like to go from having my heart splattered all over San Francisco to within 2 months standing behind Mr. Sinatra at Mr. Sinatra's nightclub act. I couldn't wrap my head around all this amazing good fortune. I really couldn't. I don't even know if I'm answering your question. I hope I'm doing okay.
You're
really
doing it great. That sounds like such an amazing experience. I mean, did you get to meet Frank Sinatra?
No, but my mom probably would have disowned me if I had, because she was unable to comprehend the fact that she wasn't getting to see him backstage. That made her mad enough, because a lot of times I would call my parents and I would say stuff like, "Hey, I'm getting to do this," and I would think, "Wow, Team Zimmerman, we're going in there." No, my mom wanted to meet Frank Sinatra. She didn't care that I was getting to meet Sinatra. She was just mad. And there was another thing that I get to do. We'll talk about. And when I said, "Dad, guess where I'm going?" He wasn't happy. He was just mad. I thought, I'm planting a flag with a big letter Z, Zimmerman. No, he wanted to do that. Yeah. So it was.
Maybe it was loving jealousy.
Pardon me?
Maybe it was loving jealousy.
It was loving jealousy. Yeah. It turns out he would rave about me when I wasn't around. That's what I came to find out later on. Yeah, as most dads do. They do that thing.
Maybe
that dad thing.
Much. Well, maybe he thought that the sort of lack of fulfillment in his eyes to you was kind of what drove you a little bit, and maybe he didn't want to ruin you by showering you with it.
I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. He'd seen it work with all of us. It worked with my sister Andrea and her opera career.
How did you feel about your life at this point, standing behind backstage, watching the auto teleprompter, watching Frank Sinatra? You've just gone and played the Improv, and then you've been booked and gone to Vegas and played in Vegas. How are you feeling about your life?
It's just, I mean, you are asking such great questions. There was a moment in that week when I was on stage, standing ovation, step off the stage, walk to the back of the club. How many seconds does that take? See, when you're a busker, you know how long time actually is. A minute, you can do so much in a minute. You say to somebody, a minute. Well, within 45 seconds of being on that stage, I was out on the side of that casino, walking towards the sunset, walking towards the Vegas Strip, singing "Fame and Fortune" by Elvis Presley at the top of my lungs to an empty but appreciative parking lot, because my heart had been ripped out. She had shown me my heart while I was still beating like this and thrown it against the wall and said, "Whatever you think is going to happen with your show isn't going to happen." Well, it was happening. It was happening bigger than I could have ever even imagined it happening. It was happening lightning fast. And it was an incredible feeling to go from backstage at Sinatra to my own show to then walking outside, because that, by the way, I love Elvis Presley. Love Elvis Presley. I love Elvis Presley. That was his first Las Vegas Hotel First performance as well. The Riviera in Las Vegas was where he did his first week of shows. And to me, all that magic, all that magic's just standing there. I'm walking around it. It doesn't ever leave. Sinatra's over here. Elvis is over here. I'm here. We're all in this little piece of energy together as far as my mythology goes. My mythology is pretty limited.
Did you sleep that night?
No. How did you know? No. There was a strip club across the way called the Paradise Lounge. Yeah, I was very popular there too.
Okay, and so you went and partied.
I did. I was pretty mad. I just had my heart ripped out. You know, there's ways you can react to that. You can feel really unattractive, and then you can go and get a career for yourself and feel really attractive about yourself for a couple minutes. That was a good feeling. And
did you get highs and lows? Was the mad partying part of managing the highs and lows of being on stage, getting a huge amount of adoration? The success has come. Do you go? You don't go backstage. You don't go back to the hotel room and eat your packed lunch and go to sleep after that. Surely,
all of those things that you just listed, every one of those things that you just listed, all those reasons, all those impeti, and manic depression. So at this point in my career, I also have two other things going on. One is untreated manic depression, actually bipolar disorder, and alcoholism. Now, that will make you very interesting. And that will also give you a lot of energy. And it'll give you some energy you don't want sometimes. But and in those days, I seem to really know how to craft all those manics into a stage show. And that's what I did. And so I guess in a larger sense, and I really believe this with all my heart, I was a rock star. I was living like one anyway. And my show was about rock and roll. And when I wasn't on stage, there's a brilliant comedian, I think you may have heard of him, Martin Ewan. He did a great review of my show. He goes, Lee Zimmerman dangles on strings what appear to be really painful marital aids, trying to simulate a rock and roll lifestyle. Then he goes back to his real one, because that's how I was living. I was living exactly like a rock star would live, on stage and off. And it was all fueled by drinking too much, and having highs and lows like this, highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows, back to back,
And
all
do
day
you
long,
with
working it into the show.
with those highs and lows, were you a happy person then with those highs and lows? I mean, you had great achievements, but
Half the time. No, probably no. No, it's never. I was not happy I wouldn't become a happy person till around 6 months after that Vegas night. It was 6 months later. And I
And
remember
so
it vividly because I had to say it out loud. It's such a great question again. I remember where I was standing when I said to myself, I don't want to say this out loud. These are words that I spoke out loud. I don't want to say this out loud because I'm afraid it's not true. But I think, all right, I'm just going to say it. I think I might be happy. Am I happy? Oh my God, I'm happy. I was standing in Palms, California. I was in my apartment. I was alone. But for the first time, I was doing absolutely the only thing that I had ever really loved doing. And I wasn't having to do anything else to pay for my existence. I was meeting people. I was meeting celebrities. I was meeting people that I had admired my entire life because that just kept happening too. Anybody that I'd ever admired just seemed to keep walking up the street in the other direction over and over again. That first 2 years that I lived in Los Angeles, if I had made a list of all the people that I wanted to meet, it was coming true. It was incredible. It was incredible. Those first 2 years, there was some strange cork of magic had been pulled out. I swear to you, I can't explain it.
And why do you think it took you 6 months after this great moment, which obviously at the time you were jubilant for, but then you have to go through the existence of life? Why does it take 6 months for this moment to bubble out of you?
Distrust.
And was that thing because of the leaving you? Was that
in part, and just some other bad programming from there's nature and nurture. A lot of stuff that went on in my childhood wasn't all that delightful, and I had a distrust of anything that looked too good to be true. Always seemed to have some really horrible consequence. And so I guess it took me about 6 months to trust that I wasn't dreaming this, that I actually did have a really good show, I guess, that I really was onto something, and that people saw strength in me that I didn't see. So I didn't trust that it would last. And then after 6 months, I guess I remember that so vividly. I'm afraid to say this out loud. I'm afraid to say this out loud. Maybe this is the other shoe. Me actually saying this out loud could be the moment when it all falls apart, but it didn't. And it just kept going. And it did that for the next
so even at the time when you're stood backstage, you can see Frank Sinatra's there. You've just performed this big show in Vegas. Was the part of you thinking that the bubble's going to pop?
Yes. Yeah. At all times, it was basically ride this thing till the wheels come off. How could they possibly be doing this? How could this possibly be happening to a little marionette show with you? You're Lee Zimmerman. You're nobody. How could this possibly be happening? So yeah, I wouldn't trust this if I were you, Lee Zimmerman. I would imagine that this is going to end. Somebody's going to wake up. Somebody's going to get a hold of Bud Friedman. They're going to call him at 1 a.m. and go, he's not supposed to be on your stage. He's not up to this. Why are you doing this? Why do you keep giving him why do you keep offering him MC spots? He can't take this is a true story. They offered me the MC spot. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? Take puppets up in between everything? And they go, no, you don't need the puppets. You don't need the puppets. They tried to explain to me that a great deal of the show was just me loving doing my show. And I heard that many times, but I had never heard it from somebody that was really in the know, that actually knew that. And it was true. It was true. And I didn't trust it enough to do this great thing I should have done. I should have given it a shot. I didn't do it. I said,
so you didn't give it a shot. You always pushed it away.
That was the busker winning the argument. That was the busker and me going, no, I have to have something to hide behind. I'm vulnerable out here. I have to have my shield, my puppet shield. You guys stay back there. You'll be on the other side of the comedy. So if something funny happens, it's in between us. I might have something to do with it, but I won't be the one completely responsible for these jokes. So no, I didn't do it, and it has haunted me quite a bit, to be perfectly honest with myself.
Well, I empathize with you. You're not alone in that feeling. I feel like the juggling props or the the tennis racket or whatever prop it is you hold in front of you. If I'm on stage with that, I'm comfortable and I can talk all day long because there's an agenda. I'm out here to do this thing. You take that off me, and suddenly it's the most terrifying thing in the world to be there without an agenda. There just to be me. Terrifying. So I definitely empathize. Did you go?
Well, I just asked.
Sorry.
Well, may I ask you? Do you mind if I ask? Aren't there times when you feel so much more yourself on stage with a hot microphone? I mean, there was a moment in my life. There was about 5 years of my life where I know that I was more pure and more human and more entirely myself when I was on stage with a hot microphone. It didn't last. It was 5 years, and I don't think I could ever have that back. Have you ever felt that way?
Yeah, very much so. So particularly when I'm out on the street and I used to have a show. It's a bit different to the show I do now. So I've lost a lot of weight since COVID, and I've got fitter again. I can take my shirt off again now, and people go, "Oh, let's watch him. He might be good." I've got into fairly good physical shape, but I haven't always been like that. For most of my life, I've been, I had a big beer gut, and I'd drink a lot, and I'd smoke a lot, and I'd do a lot of things which would, develop a kind of physique of someone that was quite lazy. And so what I do is I spend most of my show out there sort of topless or on the way to being topless, and just make jokes and play and talk about what was going on. I'd feel more comfortable. I feel more like my soul is free in those moments than in any other moment in life. I'm terrified talking to people in groups. Social anxiety, even though no one thinks it and people can't see it. I find it deeply uncomfortable to be around people all the time. But yet you put me in that situation there, and suddenly I was experimenting and playing and trying to understand the world around me and making assumptions and judgments, and all these different things flowed, and it felt so comfortable and so natural to be there doing that. Far more so than if I'd sit having a conversation with people.
Right. See, I find that exhilarating, and I love that it's not just me, you, and Jimi Hendrix who said that very thing. He said, "I am far more myself on stage than I am in any conversation you're ever going to have with me anywhere else." And I just love hearing that it's not just me. I love that notion too. That having an agenda,
we're in good company.
Thought of it that way. Yeah, we are in good company here. I'm gonna turn on a light because it's getting a little dark in here real quick.
Yeah,
is that okay?
Please do, please do. Yeah, go for it. No, mate, no worries. So the thing I'm quite interested in hearing now, and the thing I'm going to ask Lee after this is, does he go back to work on the street after this? I mean, I can't imagine somebody performing in the improv, performing around these famous comedians, going to Vegas, and then, so you've come back for the perfect time for me to pose the question. Did you go back to the street after Vegas?
That is so crazy that I did that. So I guess in the back of my mind, the entire time I was doing this street show was, this would be the catalyst to get me to nightclubs. What I really want to be is a nightclub entertainer. And then when I finally got and graduated the street, there was no two ways about it. I didn't ever have to do the street again. All I ever had to do was these improvs. They put me on tour. They do whatever they want. Then I went to one last festival. I just thought I'll do this one festival because I'd always wanted to do. When I was a street performer, Dick Finkel would never hire me for the Edmonton International Street Performer Festival. He never even got back to me, let alone turn me down. But now I'm getting an invitation to go. Was getting grandfathered in because Mickey O'Connor had been there, and Mickey O'Connor said, "You've got to hire this guy." So they brought me in, and that is when it happened. That is when I met other buskers. That is when I met people that I felt as Amy Saunders put it when we met, "You're late." We've just met. You're late. Where have you been? I've been waiting for you. Because we just fell right in, and that's how it was with so many of these people. Like I just could not believe it. So yes, I ultimately, and it freaked me out that I did this. Now I was walking a tightrope of, I'll do some street shows and I'll do some nightclub shows. And then one night, Bud Friedman sees me performing at my new address for street performing. Universal Studios had hired me to give their
Can I
new
pull us back a
attraction
little
to
bit?
City.
Can I pull us back a little bit? So,
Please.
How long do you do the stage gigs before you go to the Edmonton Festival?
A year.
So you do a year
of nothing but
it's all buses and beer and puppets, right?
improv in the improv in Santa Monica, the improv in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. And I started working at the Laugh Factory, which is another huge comedy club out here. The Comedy Store, all these major clubs, Magic Castle, which they don't even take if you're not a magician and they let you perform there. That's a big deal. So that first year was like, you're never going back to the street. There's no reason for you to return to the street. You're a graduate. You're on your own, man. You don't need to do this anymore. And when Bud Friedman saw me doing a street show, he freaked. He was mad. What are you doing? You're stepping backwards. Why are you doing that? And it had happened. I had been with my kind. And to be perfectly honest,
this was Edmonton.
That is Edmonton. And the difference between hanging with the Edmonton people and street performers and these lovely British people and these lovely Canadian people and these wonderful French people and, well, not French people, just kidding. The difference was, I love you, France. I'm kidding. I was totally kidding. I'm from the United States. You guys hate us, remember? That some of the stand-ups, if you take the stage, you may be aware of this. If you take the stage in a place like the Improv with anything that isn't a microphone, they hate you. And if you do well, they really hate you. And you're likely to do well if everybody else who goes up uses a microphone and you're the one guy that does something different. They're going to remember you. You're going to make a bigger splash if you're doing your job well, if you do it right, paying attention, you get it right. And a lot of those people weren't all that nice to me. Bill Maher. I don't know if he's big in other countries, but here he's our big, huge.
Well, we know of him definitely. He's a name, and so he was quite.
He was a douche.
Was he quite dismissive?
He was just a total douche. And people would treat me one way behind the scenes, unless I did, and like really disparaging. And then if I did well, it was worse. But I would say it was about 70-30. So 70% of the people were really nice. Jerry Seinfeld was wonderful to work with. Adam Sandler was wonderful to work with. Some of these guys, Damon Wayans, wonderful to work with. Tim Allen, wonderful to work with. John Lovitz, lovely people. But then there would be these other guys, and I could just sense it. Oh my God, I'm going up and I'm going to follow you. Oh no, you have to follow puppets. Oh, and they would all make jokes. Look, man, if you can't follow puppets, there's something wrong with your show. And if you don't want to follow puppets, there's something wrong with you. Because that's like, I'm handing you a gift, buddy. Here, follow puppets. If you can't follow puppets, what are you going to do with your life?
You create a great atmosphere on a stage. People who don't want to follow someone who's created a great atmosphere are people who aren't willing to move even a slight bit from the set routine they're doing. If they're used to just having this, this rhythm, all you've got to do is switch it up a tiny bit from a puppet show and try and use that energy that's created, surely. Speaking from ignorance, but
Well, then to the earlier question, that's how it goes. So there's me. I've done this thing. Now I've put it in the book. It's a chapter. I've done this. I know that I'm worthy of this world-class stage, like I had said when I first seen the Hollywood sign. Now I've proven to myself I can do it. And now there's these other people that are the most fascinating people I've ever met in my entire life. Buskers. First of all,
and these guys in Edmonton.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so like Flying Bob Palmer. Now here's the guy. He's got his own show. He's doing all this amazing show, but then behind the scenes he can also play the recorder and the guitar, and he's a sculptor and he's an architect. the number of things that all my blood, my family, the tribe, the people that I've met in our tribe are unlike any people you will meet anywhere else. And you can try and describe. I've tried to describe what it's like to be among street performers and even be one of them while you're doing it. Volunteers will tell you it's fun to hang around with street performers, but it's a whole other thing, man. When you are actually a busker and you're in, and they're treating you like family, like blood, because we are, that's an amazing feeling. And I wasn't getting that at the Improv, so I can tell you that it was a step backwards.
Do you think it's a thing that with busking and festival stuff, you're in the trenches, you're going out there and you're going through a struggle. It might be raining, it might be hard, and drunk, come into the middle of the show and get his dick out. You don't know what's going to happen each show. You're going out there battling. There's that sense of shared camaraderie between you all.
Absolutely. Like MASH, you're on the front lines. You're trying to do a good thing. You're going to have black humor. Behind the scenes, you have to have black humor to protect yourself. And that is exactly as you say it. It's exactly as you say it.
And so, what were your shows like when you went to Edmonton? Because you're also working there. What was it like to go back and do street again after being on the stage for so long?
Harder. I mean, I am not good with weather. I mean, nothing in my show is good. They don't weigh anything, my puppets. So the wind is right out. That the stage is floppy. I prefer to work on floppy materials. Like I told you, I'm addicted to using the foam core for a reason. It bounces back, but it doesn't look great in the wind. I had so much more focus. So, yeah, I know. It's exactly that. No, I had so much more focus. I didn't have to worry about lighting. Also, and this is big. I'm a terrible street performer. I am not a good street performer. I have the show. I don't know how to do a build. I don't know how to set them up. I don't know how to sit them down. I don't know how to make people move around. And I'm really casual about it. I'm really bad at it. And I'm terrible at asking for money. Oh, please, later on, let me tell you a story about somebody helping me. His name's P.V. Murray. Later on, just remind me that I'm so bad at street performing that my friends come to help me street perform, but they love the show. I love doing this. I just want to do the show. I have no respect for cash. So doing the show, from the nightclub to doing the street, I still have the same objective. I just want to do the show. Just want to do the show. Just want to do the show.
You didn't feel bad. You didn't feel bad about that. It wasn't something that, you kind of went back at the end of your day and went, "Oh God, I didn't know. I
forgot about money.
Properly. I didn't build the cash."
Yeah, I did. I still wish that I could, but I know that no amount of training is ever going to take away what I think when I'm out there. All I can think is, I love this song. I love this song. I hope I do it justice. I love this song. Oh God, I hope I do that move well, because it's a really good move when I do it well. It's really hard to do. It's the other thing about this show. It's difficult to do. It's only gotten more difficult. There was a time when I could do it without looking. There was a time when I was doing it so frequently, I could keep the audience engaged. Because you're supposed to do that, right? Did you know about this? You're supposed to look the audience in the eyes. Well, I'm always so consumed with trying to make sure that they do their job, that my little marionettes are where they're supposed to be and not floating, doing something stupid that I don't want to see, that I end up forgetting to engage the audience. So now I have wrote in a spot into my show. I've written in a spot. It's when I'm doing Tina Turner. She sits down and I say, "Okay, look, I'm engaging with you. Look, isn't this wonderful? I'm acknowledging that you're here, I'm here, we're all here. I have to do this because I really want to do a good job with the puppets. But we're cool, right? We get it. I love you. You love me. This is great. I'm going to go back to doing a good job." And I literally had to write it in because people would point it out. Other performers would go, "Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you looking at them?"
But it's a nice thing as well that you're not doing that. It's nice because,
I don't know.
You're doing a piece of street theater. You're not doing, and this is why it sounds to me like, just listen to it, that you filled the place of the performer's performer, where the acts would come and watch you and enjoy you, and tell me if I'm wrong with this, and love watching your work, specifically because it wasn't what much of them were doing, which is this, heavily manipulative, crowd controlled, maximizing earnings thing. You're doing a piece of work which can be enjoyed.
Well, I do see it the exact same way. Say that again. I'm sorry. I just got lost for a split second because you said something earlier.
Got Drew by the comments with Martin Ewan, I suspect. Hey, Martin, how you doing?
I did. I love Martin. So, I can't help it. It's difficult to love Martin because he doesn't like it. So let's just all agree to do it anyway.
You got it. The thing I was talking about is, I said that it sounds like you became a performer's performer, and most performers, the performer that performers go to see is because they're not doing the same thing everyone else is doing. They're not doing a show which is honed to making cash, and primarily that is the concern. It's honed on being a piece of interesting work, and that's something personally, as a performer who really enjoys the craft of street performance and enjoys the idea that it can be art. They're the shows I try and see in festivals because they're the things that are interesting. They're the things that take our form forward. It sounds like you were doing that, and that's why you didn't have all these things these performers are trying to beat into you, because your concern isn't that.
Well, I can't believe you're saying that, because one of my prized possessions is, in fact, this, which I won in Halifax. It's my Street Performer's Choice Award. It's this road case that I won for being, as you say, and I do feel like that it probably is my hook of all hooks, and it's the thing I'm super excited about. I love other entertainers do really seem to take a shine to the show because I'm not motivated by that. You got to do this. There's all these rules to doing it, and you got to make the money, and it's all this. I just am never about that, and I do feel like sometimes the other performers pick up on that and do respect it. It means the world to me that you say that.
Well, I'm hearing that. I've watched your work on YouTube, but I wouldn't have been in the location where the people were. But I just don't understand how you describe it, and I recognise it with other people's work that I've seen, and the way people interacted with those kinds of works that have. You created it in a vacuum, so it was you. It had you about it. It had your content, your drives, your interests in it. It never at any point got workshopped by 5 performers who created it into this money-making power show, you know?
Although they have tried, people have tried. No, I know exactly what you mean, and boy, it's one of my great privileges because I feel like that's who I've been. My biggest fans have always been the other entertainers, always, because they see that it's genuine. I guess maybe they see that I really genuinely care about the show above all things. But I just want to do a good job. Is my motto. I've been saying it for decades. People
You're an
make fun.
artist, you know, and that's valuable. And I think that art can be on the street, and it's you know, it's a rare thing to see it.
Oh,
I think it should be there more. I feel like we need to drive forward. We've done an hour and 20 minutes now, so we have 40 minutes left. There's a huge amount of story to tell. So you've done Edmonton, you've met all these lovely people, you've had a great time, and then you performed at Universal. So why did you go to Universal? What draws you there after Edmonton?
They came and found me. They were opening a new attraction called City Walk, and they wanted to have. So it's a synthetic street. Basically, it's no foot traffic. I mean, it's a no car traffic, all foot traffic. High end shops, high end retail. They were just going to take what they'd seen down on this wildly successful Third Street Promenade and do their own version of it, but really slicked out with the way that Universal Studios would do such a thing. So it was a synthetic street, and they wanted to make it look authentic. So they brought in street performers, and boy, oh boy, they paid us in addition to the money we were making in the hat.
How did they approach you?
Impressive. I think they came and got a cluster of us. I remember I knew at least 2 of the people that were in that office there, Tom Gilmore and another guy. Yeah, they knew about my show from other places. I think one of them knew me from the improv. Because that was the other thing. Yes, I was the weirdo bastard of the club scene who also did the street. You would see me at Magic Castle and on the street. You would see me at the improv and on the street. And that I did know a lot of weird connections that way. So Universal came about that way. And that was, you see 40,000 people a day at Universal Studios. So that was my address for 9 years. I stayed at Universal Studios for 9 years. Yeah. And it worked out really well.
When the guy from the improv, can you say the guy's name again? My memory's awful. The guy on the street, Bud Freeman. So Bud Freeman sees you on the street and says, "What are you doing? You're moving backwards."
You have to make a choice. His exact words were, "Lee, you have to make a choice. Are you a street performer or are you a nightclub entertainer? Because people aren't going to want to come and see. If they see you in the street and they see you in my nightclub, they're not going to want to pay. I could see this guy for free." And there's a very smart thing I could have done, and there's the very Lee thing that I did. And I guess I loved the freedom. I guess I love being my own producer. I guess I love being my own editor. I guess I love not making as much money. I guess I love not being as successful. I guess I loved a lot of things about busking that I just couldn't shake. There's just no way around it. The other thing is that I'm a celebrity junkie. I live for celebrity stuff, and that I have a magic gift for spotting them in my audience. You can go as stealthy as you want. I'm going to notice you in my audience. And I loved encountering those people in my show. And it just over and over again, it would happen over and over again. I would see somebody in my audience, like Steve Vai. He's a guitar player for Frank Zappa and Steve Vai. Yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. He was in my audience one night, and I just breathed into the microphone. I said something about "Thank you, Mr. Butler," which is a inside joke about a character he played in the movie Crossroads. And he came back again and again. He gave me a $20 bill when no one was around. He just put a $20 bill in my hat when no one was there to even see him do it. My wife saw him do it from dozens of yards away. I live for celebrity stuff, and Universal was amazing for that. Yeah, celebrities. I never get enough celebrity stuff.
And so you worked 9 years in Universal Studios. At that time, are you going and trying to do the stage solo? Because, you know, Bud Freeman cuts his ties with you, I assume. I assume this is how that story ended.
No, that's not how it went at all. They always want to be back, and I was always welcome. And I was able to go there several times. You know, I would go and do a couple of shows a year there, but I stopped calling. Out of sight, out of mind. No, they never cut ties with me. I could go there now. In fact, I went there 8 years ago. I was in LA, and I just called and said I'd like to do a set, and they were fine with it. No, it's just that I think I disappointed him, that I didn't just. First of all, the guy that got me that improv showcase said, in exchange for being the guy that gets you this, I want to be your manager. So when I sat down with Bud Friedman that very first night, and he said, we want to be in business with you, and he starts suggesting all these names, he says, do you have a manager? I said, yes, this guy. But he wasn't a proper manager. He wasn't a comedy manager. He was an editor with a magazine, Venice Magazine. He was just a guy that had connections. And Bud was very disappointed because what they had in mind was grooming me to become something much bigger. And I ultimately,
so like your own TV show, this kind of thing.
Correct. I mean, I know that for a fact because of conversations that we had subsequently and with his staff. And the guy that used to book me, the guy that said, you don't need the puppets to do the MC slot. Okay, Lee? Yeah, I wasn't believing in myself enough to follow up on all these generous offers being made to me by Mark and Bud. And I just, again, a lot of it was fear.
So you said before, you said you wanted the freedom of the street. But is part of it self-sabotage?
Oh God,
do you think that might
be? not think and not might. No for a fact. Yeah. So I there is a demon in this machine that just cannot stand the idea of me doing well or me being happy, and he distrusts me being happy, and he comes to the fore every time I think he's dead. He comes back. And that's what was happening then. He hasn't been around in 8 years because I gave up alcohol 8 years ago. And the demon seems to have spent some time hanging out with the drunken me. He's still here, but he's at bay right now. Yeah, when I had everything that I wanted, because another thing happens. I hope we get to talk about that. The woman that I ended up marrying was the key to my entire life. Was meeting this one woman, and yeah, I think part of me had to sabotage that as well.
Well, if you want so much of your story to tell, we've got half an hour left of the interview. So if you want, we can go through the stuff that's there. And if you've got time again, maybe in January or February, we can meet up and finish the story again if you'd want to do that.
Man, you're so generous. I want this to be your interview. You can say whatever you like and steer this in any direction. And I would love to come back if ever you would have me.
Yeah, by all means, I'd be more than happy for that. I've had an absolute joy chatting with you so far. So let's focus now on the time at Universal. Yeah. And we'll go through some of the experiences there, things that happened there, and then I'll get the last 15 minutes. I'll just get a few thoughts off you about the world, and then we'll close up and we can pick it up again in a couple of months' time.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you some of the better things.
So you're at Universal.
Universal. Well, the thing about that was, because it was itself a tourist location. I mean, this is where people are going to come and they're just going to be. But in addition to that, it is a working studio. So people are always doing things there. Like Ivan Reitman, he did Ghost. Ivan Reitman and his son is currently directed Ghostbusters Afterlife. He directed the original Ghostbusters, Stripes, Animal House. He's just amazing. These are the kind of people I would see in my audience at Universal Studios. And one of the people that saw my show was a guy named Bruce Halford. He had been a producer on the Roseanne show, and then he was on the show called The Drew Carey Show. And just being visible down there at Universal Studios, they would track me down. I mean, if you saw my show and you didn't have time to get a card, you could always call the office. And that's what he did. He tracked me down through the front office. We saw a guy there the other night. We really want to hire him for The Drew Carey Show. And they did an entire episode, an entire contest episode wrapped around my marionettes. It's April Fool's Day. They were celebrating, and it was Spot the Mistakes. So at one point, the entire cast, and this was a top 10 situation comedy in the United States at the time. The week that my episode aired, we took seventh place overall, and I was just this little featurette. It all came about because of Universal Studios. I'll tell you one that didn't come about, and this is the one that makes me want to put a bullet in my head. One day I went down to set up at Universal Studios, and there's a camera crew waiting for me. And you're a street performer. You know what that's like, right? You don't want to see that. You don't want to see a real camera crew setting up real camera equipment, getting ready to shoot your show, and having no explanation as to where they're taking it. Who are you? Why are you here? Why are you taking my show with you when you go? What is this? What are you doing to me? And what it was they were part of a new production that they were putting together. They were there to just get some setup shots to show the production team for this movie called Being John Malkovich. And by the way, the writer is a huge fan of your show, and he really is hoping you'll be a part of this project, right? And it's called Being John Malkovich. Great. That's usual title. Okay. Fine. Yeah. Propaganda films, huh? Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, they'd stiffed a friend of mine. Didn't get paid by propaganda, but yeah, I don't think I'm really that keen on it. They call back a couple weeks later, and you really should be a part of this. The writer kind of based the character on you was the thing. That's what they kept saying, and they didn't say the following things. John Malkovich is in it. John Cusack is in it. Steve Kaufman wrote it. Charlie Kaufman wrote it. They didn't say any of these things. I didn't know what I was turning down, so I turned down Being John Malkovich. And it turns out when the movie came out, John Cusack was wearing my exact hairstyle at that time, which was a ponytail with all the curls coming down on the side. He had puppets exactly my size, not the kind that the guy they hired even knew how to use. He had to make them special for that. It was the biggest, dumbest thing I ever did. It came about because of Universal Studios. I also got to work for Slash and Guns N' Roses, and it led to working for Frank Zappa. That was a really good one too.
So these are all amazing things. So I'm just going to travel back for a minute and go back to the Drew Carey show, and then I think we can get on to Frank Zappa and Slash and that kind of stuff.
Sorry.
After that. No, don't say sorry. This is all amazingly interesting. It really is. The John Malkovich thing is incredible as well. I'm sure you do kick yourself for it, but then you can watch the screen and see a bit of yourself on the screen from these incredible artists. So, Drew Carey show, you've been asked to go and work with it. You're creating puppets, characters in the show. Am I right in thinking that?
I had to create the entire cast was the 6 main characters. I had 22 days, but then as I was going along, they added 4 more characters. So I had to make 10 marionettes in 22 days. And in those days, it took me a week to make 1 puppet. But I had made a pact with myself that whatever they say, the answer will always be yes. So he said, can you have these puppets ready by the 22nd? Absolutely. Can you? Yes. Can you? Yes. Can you make it so that the puppet's head can be smacked off and roll down the hallway? Yes. Whatever they said, the answer was always yes. And I cannot believe that I managed to make 10 marionettes in 22 days. And have them, and I delivered them, and they were happy, and they loved them, and they hired me to do a second thing when they had their because they shot my episode, and then a couple weeks later was their 100th.
Go on. And before we go on, because it's so interesting, I want to squeeze a bit more life out of it if we can. Sure. So do they hand you scripts, or do they just want the puppets to get the likeness, or how's the development go with this?
That is so amazing that you asked that. Okay, this is because it's so key. Yes, they had in their mind, they had their idea what a fun puppet segment would be, using my style of marionettes and their characters. How would we do this? And they came up with this thing, and they presented it. And I show up on set, and the guest star that week was Marion Ross, who played Mrs. Cunningham on Happy Days. Marion Ross and everybody is there watching this terribly unfunny thing being read at the show read. Yeah, this light is just awful. I hate it. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to looking like I'm not in the room as opposed to looking like I'm well lit in the room. Anyway, they presented me with a script. We all showed up on the set one day, and they asked me to demonstrate it. I had a crew of puppeteers that I brought in. They all worked on Team America. These are really, really talented guys. We couldn't make anything happen with what they'd written, and they knew it. And they looked at it and they pull me aside and they go, Lee, this is just not entertaining. What can we do? They're so boring. When you were in our offices, you had the puppets whizzing in every direction. And I said, that is what I tried to tell you, that you have to have physical activities for these puppets. Puppets standing around talking is about the most boring thing you can ever see in your entire life.
It's conversation.
No, it was more than that. So what we ended up doing was I went home that hour. I went home. I got every puppet that I owned, which was like 30 puppets, 35 puppets at that time. When I brought every one of them back, and I went into the writers' offices, and I went through not every move, every nuance, every single possible thing that I could do with marionette. And I demonstrated on their table for them. And they wrote a whole slapstick play in, they reverse engineered a slapstick play based on all these nuances that I can do and produce with puppets. I said, well, I can do a transformation puppet. They built one into the script. I said, well, I can do this. I can make them do this. And they go built into the script. And it just went like that over and over again. And so ultimately what they used was reverse engineered from all the moves that I could do. And I thought that was just genius. These guys were so good to me. They were so wonderful. And then after we shot that episode and it aired and it got seventh place, they had just had their 100th episode anniversary, and they wanted to celebrate again. So they brought me in to do a secret gag reel, really raunchy, really filthy, dirty gag reel just for the crew to celebrate their 100th episode. That was kind of neat too. So that told me that I'd done a good job for them. They kept hiring me.
And not just do they hire, but they hired you to show at the cast how much they appreciated them. I mean, this gag reel just for them is something which is here's a final gift for you guys. It's wonderful.
God, it was. And so they invited me to be there to be a part of it. I got to share that night with them. I got to see Joe Walsh on stage with Drew Carey banging out Funk 49 on drums. And I was invited to be a part of this family thing, man. It was very much like I felt incredibly privileged. I can tell you that. You are a very, very wise man to pick up on that. I felt incredibly privileged.
And so next you've missed John Malkovich. You've kind of done the thing which I empathize when you talked about it, where people are filming you. You're going, well, you're going to make money off this. Like, why aren't I going to make money off this? What are you doing with my stuff? You're taking my IP. You're taking the things I've built and prepared, going to use it without giving me anything back. What the hell is this? And you regret that. But then after you get to work with Slash, I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, that was again Universal Studios. This guy comes up and they were finishing their Use Your Illusion tour. Guns N' Roses had been on tour for 2.5 years. It was the largest tour, the highest grossing tour. It set all these records, and they were finally coming to an end. And they were going to do it at Universal Studios. They're going to have their final wrap party at Universal Studios. But not only that, their manager thought I would be perfect for a music video, which I thought that too. And I had an Axl Rose puppet in my show, and I was like, "This is incredible. Let's do that." He goes, "Well, can you meet me at Slash's house?" And I went to Slash's house. He has terrariums all over his house: snakes, turtles, more snakes, lizards, skinks. Every inch of every wall was terrariums. He had a Newfoundland dog giant dog bouncing out on the porch. He's an incredible guy. And I set up my show and I did my Hendrix puppet for him in his living room. And I finish, my puppet plays with his teeth. He dies, and Slash looks over at me and he goes, "You're scary, dude." And then a little while, "You're scary, dude." The scariest looking guy in rock and roll told me I was scary. So then we watch a video of my show. He just wants to see how it translates to video. So we watch a video, and Jimi Hendrix puppet plays the guitar with his teeth. And he looks over at me and he stops, and Slash looks over and he goes, "You're scary, dude." So twice. It looks good in promo. I still don't know what it means. I'm not entirely sure if it was a good or a bad thing. But then that led to, I got to do the Guns N' Roses final wrap party for the Use Your Illusion tour. All the band was there, and Axl Rose. This is the best part, because this is the worst part. Axl Rose sat with his back to my show because he knew I had an Axl Rose puppet that I was treating poorly. All I would do is I would introduce the Axl Rose puppet, and then I would drop kick it off the stage because I was pissed at him because he was pissing off all of his audiences. He was being such a dildo to all his audiences. I thought, fuck him. Sorry.
It's okay. You can say it. It's fine.
I didn't know that. I've been so good. I almost made it. I almost made it to the very end. It's so difficult for me. I have Tourette's. Not really, but I could get it if you wanted. Anyway, Axl Rose sat with his back to my show right there with an entire table full of people describing my act to him. Lita Ford's over here. The entire band, they are laughing, they're pointing, they're like, waving their beers around. They're loving my show. Axl Rose sat in those white leathers that he wears in the the Paradise City video. He sat right there with his back to my show. That was pretty mean. I love that.
But that sounds a lot like him. Like that's his power move in that situation, right?
Totally. Yeah. He's a wang.
And after you do the show, does he talk to you? Was he warm to you? Was he an asshole?
No, he didn't say one word to me. Nobody did. He didn't talk to anybody that night except the people that were at his table. The band broke up right after that. The band never spoke to each other. That was the last time they were in the same room together for like another 12, 13 years. That last
and so you
moment.
Sense the energy, right?
Totally. And I saw Slash several times after that. He always would stop by and say hello at my show at Universal. Always give me another 20. Always just the nicest guy. And I came to find out something about him later on that, you know, if we get another chance to talk, that we had in common. That was just
talk next time, yeah.
I hope so, man. I hope so. This is fun for me. I just hope I gave you some good stuff.
You're being very engaging. So to Frank Zappa.
Oh God. So my favorite drummer of all time is a guy named Terry Bozzio, and I had opened for Terry Bozzio. This is just too cool. So I made a Mr. Spock drummer. That was my drummer. I wanted Terry Bozzio on drums, but when I was making him, his eyes are slightly up like this, and it just turned into Mr. Spock. So I kept it. And then one day I'm setting up on, and a kid comes up and he grabs my controls. He's pulling on my controls, and I go, no, you're gonna get me tangled, please. Don't do that. And his mom, this beautiful blonde woman, rock and roll woman, goes, oh no, it's okay. His dad's a drummer. Who do you have on drums anyway? And I said, well, it was gonna be Terry Bozzio. And she goes, well, that's my husband. I said, what? Terry Bozzio is my husband. In fact, we're down here. I was gonna ask you, would you like to open for Terry Bozzio? Because we're doing a show at the Hollywood Palace and they have a marquee. We had this great idea. Puppet show and Terry Bozzio. What do you think? Would you do it? And I was like, I'm killing myself because it's a Spinal Tap joke. I love Spinal Tap. Terry Bozzio is my drumming god. I mean, he's everything. He's the one. If there was only ever going to be one drummer, that's the guy. And so the next day I call and Terry Bozzio answers the phone and I said, is this Terry? He goes, yes. And I said, I'm a huge fan of yours. He goes, I'm a huge fan of yours. Ended up the next night, I'm performing there, and a woman who had seen me several times now wants me to come and work at her house. It's Moon Unit Zappa. She sees me at the Terry Bozzio show. She says, tomorrow night is Margarita night at Barking Pumpkin. That's the name of this of Frank's company and his home studio. So you'll come to our house. You'll entertain Frank. Frank was dying at the time. Frank only had another 3 months to live. Full Grizzly Adams beard when I showed up and I got to perform for Frank Zappa. Even when I say it sometimes, I have to stop myself and go, wait a minute. You must have just dreamt that. I got to perform for Frank Zappa at his house. And they also told me, don't be thrown if he doesn't laugh. Doesn't mean he doesn't like you. It's just hard to make Frank laugh. That's what she said of her own dad. She called him Frank. He laughed at everything. He made a reference to the fact that my Hendrix, he goes, that little finger is really moving because my Jimi Hendrix puppet, his hand moves, but his fingers don't. So what he was saying is, wow, you're hitting a lot of notes with just one pinky finger. It was kind of a dig, but I didn't care. It was Frank Zappa. Then the thing that stands out most, what I remember most about Frank Zappa is what I don't remember, and that is this. I do my show. Matt Groening is there, the guy who invented my favorite TV show, The Simpsons. They take me off into the other room, Mrs. Zappa, Gail Zappa, and Moonian, and they're like, he loved it. It was great. What do you want? You want a shirt? You want a jacket? What do you want? So I just want him to sign my drum kit. And we go back in to get him to sign my drum kit. And I hand him my Sharpie marker. I hand him my drum kit. And he signs next to Terry Bozzio's signature, next to Steve Vai's signature. And he writes FZ. And as he's doing it, I said, I'm a huge fan of your music. You can tell by some of the things that I said. You know, I made references, but I love your interviews. And he goes, well, you know what you should do? And he starts writing his name, FZ. He goes, you should, blah, 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 blah. He starts telling me what I should do. And in my head, I'm hearing this. Lee, Frank Zappa is giving you advice. You have to remember this. Lee, make sure you pay attention. Lee, are you listening to what he's saying? Lee. My brain was so insistent that I pay attention. I cannot tell you to this day what I was saying was such a great idea. That's a great idea. No, I should do that. That's a great idea. I was losing my mind. In my heart, and my chest is jumping out. And my heart was jumping out of my chest to do this thing. I cannot tell you what great advice. And not only was he giving me great advice, it sounded like he was giving me permission to use an interview or something. I don't know what he said. But I think I regret that worse than the being John Malkovich thing. But I got to perform.
Did you have like a state of anxiety? Is that fair in thinking? Like this hero of yours?
I don't know that it was anxiety. It wasn't anxiety. I was overwhelmed with joy. I just couldn't wrap my head around how incredibly cool this was. I wasn't. Yeah. The other thing is that I was dating a celebrity at this point. I shouldn't have been that blown away. I wasn't blown away by a celebrity. It wasn't his fame. He became famous because he was Frank Zappa. He would have been famous no matter what. It had nothing to do with his celebrity. It was the fact that I was standing in the room where, because that's the other thing I didn't say. All his master reels, all his master tapes. He said, set up wherever you want. I set up right next to my favorite Frank Zappa record, Zoodalores, the master reels, right behind me. One size fits all, apostrophe. I mean, just an entire row. All of his life's work on video, on audio. I cannot overstate how overwhelmed I was with how cool this was. Not necessarily anxiety. I don't know what word would apply. Zappiety. I was zapped. Yeah. I was zapped hard, man. I could not wrap my head around it. I still can't.
And so when you walked out of there, you've given Frank. I mean, he's dying, right? He's in a bad way. He's quite ill. You've given him a night of laughter and joy. Is that not why we do what we do? Is that not the thing, to create joy in people? You create joy in an artist that has influenced millions of people.
How much money do I have to raise to get that privilege? Who do I have to pay to do what you just said? Yes, that is exactly what I got into it for. That's all I can ever think about is, oh my God, I just made a stranger laugh. Even if it wasn't Frank Zappa, even just getting a stranger to stop in his tracks on his way to his lunch. He gets 15 minutes time to have his lunch, and he's going to spend his 15 minutes watching us. That's insane. That's so cool. I can't even believe it. How cool is that? We cut out all the middlemen. If you can't find so much to love about the equation of street performance, we're cutting out everything. You'll either enjoy this or you won't. I'm not making you do anything you're not wanting to do. You just can stay or you can go. Doesn't matter. I'm doing this because I love doing it. If you love watching me do it, man, we are all winning. And that night I went home to my girlfriend and I shook my head. I mean, I literally could not wrap my consciousness around what had just happened. And still I'm having a hard time doing it.
I can imagine. It seems like you've had that over and over again through your life as well, with the amount of people just some worldwide culture who've had the zenith of cultural effect on the planet. You've managed to come into contact with and touch, and I think that's fascinating. And I look forward to, in the next interview, hearing more of this and going into the later years of that as well. But we're reaching the last 10 minutes now. So I'm just going to ask you some questions about street performance and about the world. We'll move away from your own personal stories until a couple of months' time when we'll get you back on. And 100%, I want to hear the rest of your story because I've been absolutely fascinated. I'll be honest, I had a really long day today and I was very, very tired coming to the interview, and I was worried that I was going to be able to do my job properly because I was so exhausted. But it's been a pleasure. It's been no challenge at all listening to you. It's absolute joy. So please don't be worried for that.
Thanks.
The questions, no worries.
You're really good at this. You're really, really good at this.
Thank you as well. Reciprocated. It's easy when interviewing someone who has a credible life and has interesting, passionate things to say, and someone who cares about what they do. So this is the question I have for you, and I've got a couple of questions just to end the interview. Why do you think you don't see as much art on the street? Why do you think there's, and when I say that, people go out and make a living on the street performing, but you don't see artists every day on the street. Every street performer isn't necessarily a street artist, I'd say, and you might disagree with me there.
I think a lot of it has to do with people are walking around with television studios in their pockets. And so everybody's creating something every minute of every day. Look what I made, look what I made, look what I made, look what I made, to the point of exhaustion already. First of all, they're only interested in the stuff that they create for themselves. A lot of these people, the only reason that they've brought their telephone to a major event, not to see it, but to prove that they were there. The phone is there to validate. Look, I was having fun. You can see it. Says it right here. I was having fun. And I think
I can prove it.
I can prove it. Prove it. Look, yeah. And I think that has a big deal to do with it. Like no longer being interested in what other people might have to offer. Just like, you know, because a big part of the equation of encountering art on the street is being, you know, everybody has a responsibility on this. I'll be the artist. You be the person who enjoys it. You be the artist. I'll be the person who enjoys it. We've got to share this responsibility. And I think a lot of people just don't even care anymore. And it is.
And do you think that drives the performer or artist to have less? I very rarely see work on the street that has narrative or that has, you know, has theatre. I don't see street theatre on the streets anymore. And I say anymore, I've been doing it 20 years, and I think I've very rarely ever seen it in my entire life of doing street performance.
I'm intrigued by that.
That's the reason.
I got to tell you. You tell me. Come on. I think you have a better handle on it than me, and I know what you're referring to. I just don't know how to articulate it.
Well, I hear this is a problem. Okay, so a lot of the street theatre that I hear about is secondhand account because it's happened in the late 80s and the early mid 90s, where you get people going out in the street and creating stuff that is, it's got narrative, it's got a story to it. It's not something that's specifically, thank you Melvin, not something that's specifically designed to extract money from you. It's something that's designed to convey an experience. And I very rarely see that now. Most of the work I see on the street, which is incredible, and there's loads of it that I love, most of it is just money, and it's frustrating. And I see things like yourself where you've developed these interesting pieces of work where I can watch it and soak it in and understand it and see the craft of it. And all of the craft isn't just designed to manipulate me into clapping at the end and giving you 5, 10, or 20 pounds.
Oh man, it's sad. Not so much that I have an answer. All I know is that you're so right. It's not so much.
Well, what do you think about it?
Oh, I think I don't want to sound like grandpa, but I guess there's no other way to do it. There's been a shift. There's been a shift in everybody has now become a star. Nobody wants to be an audience. And I don't see anybody having the patience to have the spotlight not be on them for 5 seconds. And I love being in an audience. Quite frankly, it's exhilarating to go and see a show that I'd never, who could conceive of such a thing? You know what I mean? First time you see Bike Boy, who would have thought that was A, possible, B, thought of it, or C, what am I seeing? How come he's not a monstrously huge star worldwide? That you don't get these sensations anymore when you walk around these things, and I just don't, that vibe. It's also that universal spirit you were referring to earlier, where you're saying, you know, we're gonna share this space. We're all gonna have to work together on this. I hate to sound like grandpa's bitter, but there's something lacking in this latest generation in terms of soul and humanity. I apologize for anyone who disagrees.
But that is
not universal. It's just a lot.
But it's the exact thing that you're talking about. It's something which has been measured and discussed and is evident, is that our culture has become more individually driven. And it's a weird position to talk about this because we go out there and present to large crowds of people, so that all that focus was on us. So we were individuals in that way, but the society has become atomized into all of the individuals. And as you said, if I see a show, I long to be able to sit in the crowd and absorb it and understand it and stop trying to wrap my brain around what's going on there, to share it with other people who are there in that moment. But if everybody's constantly wanting to be that like that, what you said, they're constantly in their own performing thing of that. Even though I'm a crowd of 100 people watching you, really I'm thinking about how they're looking at me, because society has become about
Look at me watching a show. I'm watching this guy's show.
Yes. Yeah. And I suppose that leans into these manipulative shows where they have to use every psychological trick in the book to wrestle you away from your natural predisposition, which is of, oh, I'm here. Look.
Yeah, you're hitting so many good points on this one. Yeah, I don't like sound in the way that it comes out, but that's the way that it is. There's been a shift, and it's not a good one. And I think it could come back around.
Well, that's the interesting thing is, do you think your work that you did when you were in the early 80s or mid 80s, do you think that would fly nowadays? Do you think you'd be able to have the same life trajectory that you had then now in this environment?
Well, I mean, I've done some shows in the last couple months that would lead me to think, yeah, you know what, that they could probably have existed now. You know, I could have, if I could have extricated that 18, 19-year-old version of me and placed it in this, I think that could have worked. Not as well because people they're so jaded. God, I hate saying these obvious things, but it's so true.
Selfie booth in your puppet show, wouldn't you?
So, I'm sorry?
You'd have a selfie booth in the puppet stall, so at the end of the show, everyone could one by one come and have a selfie with the puppets. It'd be about the product they get.
That's it. There you go. Now that appeals to everybody. Or would you rather lose yourself in the idea that you don't need computers to generate animation? You could do it live, because that's what I think is the appeal of the marionettes that I'm trying to do. Is this isn't, you know, obviously you can see a computer do anything. We've been watching that for decades. Computers can generate anything you want to see, but can you do it live? Can you do it now? Can you do it in front of me? And nothing is going to replace that energy. When you watch one of your busking friends on one of these national television shows, you always say to yourself, I know this guy. It's never the same. It's on camera. It's just not the same as being in the presence of John Higbee, who painted this magnificent painting behind me. I love you, John Higbee. A portrait of me and my Jimi Hendrix puppet. God bless you, John Higbee. It's when you see these things in person that they take their real meaning. Anything can be on video. That's why we have YouTube. Anything can be on tape. Anything can be on digital. That's not it. Live performance will always be live performance for that reason. I hope it comes back.
Well, I completely agree with you. There's a certain energy and jeopardy of the moment watching something live. When you're there in that moment, you're feeling the things. Things could go wrong or right. Yeah, exactly that. When a puppet moves, you're watching the actual puppet move in front of you, watching the shadows play across it. You can hear the response of someone across the room when they see that thing as well, the communal aspect to it. So one last question as we're approaching the last few minutes of the interview. If you had to give any young puppeteer, street performer advice, what would it be?
Momentum is everything. If you start to get anywhere with what you're doing, if you start to get any play, if you start to feel yourself moving forward, never stop and take a break. Never say to yourself, you know what, this is going too fast. I need to catch my breath. You don't need to catch your breath. You're going to run better on adrenaline. If you take a break, like I did with the improv, if you stop, you're not going to be moving forward. You're a shark. Remember, you're a shark and you're an artist. And the other thing is, You're doing this for you. Don't ever forget why you started doing this in the first place, to amuse yourself. Always make sure you're doing that. If you're not amusing yourself, then you're just wasting everybody's time, because they're going to see that. They're going to see right through you. Look at me. I've learned how to do this thing that I know gets a reaction from people. No, they're not going to enjoy that. If you're really trying to get put something over there, also have something in your heart, man. Have something that you got to express. Find something that you love so much you have to share it. Then I'll probably find a way to love it too, because it looks must be something. You look so excited about it. And that's a shared thing. You know, sharing is fun. Sharing a moment is fun. Watching somebody do something on tape that happened a million years ago is also kind of nice. I like watching Jimi Hendrix in concert. That's the only way I'm going to get to do it. But to share the live moment, you know, we're here and it started to drizzle on us and he got a laugh out of me. Oh my God, there's synthetic snow and he's making me laugh about it. There's so many things that can happen in a shared moment that can't happen when I go to YouTube and watch it played back.
Yeah, I completely agree. Lee, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. It really has.
Pleasure with you, man. You're so good at this. Thank you, man.
Hey, no worries at all. And we will get you back. We'll probably do it January, February. I'll be in contact really soon after that. Hang on after the interview. I'd love to have just a very quick chat with you after that. For everyone else, things to remember: sharks need to swim to survive. Be a shark, keep swimming. Everyone, thank